Welcome into another episode of Debate Night, everybody. We've got another great episode today. We're going to talk a little bit about Ottawa. We're going to talk a little about the playoffs that are approaching and just some other
Playoffs.
random. Yeah, exactly. I wish
Playoffs.
that saying is basically all there is to say about the playoffs, it seems. But other than that, we're joined today by Brodie, as always.
Hello, everyone. I am in just outside of Detroit, Michigan, getting ready for D-Glow.
Go Lions.
Or how some people would say DGLO.
Yes, wearing the Lions colors too. That is very Detroit of you. Big Lions guy.
No.
Okay. We're joined by Hunter today.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I'm not a robot this week. So, I got my Wi-Fi extender. Just kidding, man. My Wi-Fi's good. We're good to go.
He got you guys.
I got someone. Someone out there is like, this idiot doesn't know how to work a computer.
I think I would have cried.
I really hope you just turned into a robot right there.
I would have cried if he would have started stuttering. Like, I think I would have fell out of my chair.
I didn't know how to act. I did. It was an interesting one for me. Normally, I don't have to.
Steven's here, the West Coast Warrior, ultimate grit, up at 5:30 in the morning.
I'm at home because I did not want to get to the office at 5:30 this morning. So let's see how today goes.
Ultimate grit, ultimate respect. Shots to the rest of the contestants. All right, we're going to hop into our first topic today. We recently just had the LWS Open at Ottawa. Everybody's calling it just Ottawa. Let's put some respect on LWS.
Presented by the Natty.
Yeah, presented by the Natty.
That wasn't the full name.
Yeah, you got to get the presented by.
No, there was
more.
Was there another one?
Another one. Yeah, Dynamic Disc.
Oh, yeah.
You got to say Dynamic Disc.
True. Yeah.
It's the LWS Open.
At Idlewild.
At Idlewild. Sponsored by Dynamic Disc. Presented by the Natty.
That's perfect. Well, we're actually going to talk naming rights later as one of our topics, so that's a good segue.
Great tournament.
It rolls off the tongue very well.
Yeah, it really does. But anyway, so Idlewild, always a fun event to watch. The course, I feel like this year we're gonna, we're starting to see courses play a little bit different as, and we're going to talk a little bit about this more with another topic, but as the field is just getting stronger really quick. And so kind of every time we visit a course, we kind of have to ask the question, especially with these courses that are longer standing on the tour and more of the wooded type, I feel like come under scrutiny a bit more. Ottawa has a really interesting play style because you have a course that by total feet is not very short. It's not super long, but it's not crazy short. But by hole to hole, it is a bit short because you have a lot of short par fours. There's just a ton of par fours. So it's an interesting makeup. You don't have as much OB as other courses. And, like we've seen with a lot of events this season, you have people saying, oh, I think it was playing a little too soft. You look at the leaderboard early on, it was getting shredded by a lot of people. So I'm just going to ask to start off here, how do you feel about Ottawa as a touring level course? Was it playing too soft? Brodie, what do you think?
It's definitely one of those courses that is very unique, and a lot of people really enjoy coming here because the style of play is just that. It's very demanding off the tee shot, of where if you can hit the first gap, if you can get into like some sort of fairway situation, you will have likely a scramble to get your birdie. And that's the majority of the holes, especially on the back nine there. That's pretty much a lot of how those wooded holes play. It was interesting. I played a practice round with Calvin, and he was kind of talking about how he feels like courses like this are going to struggle to stay on tour, mainly because of the distance, and also like as trees fall, if they're not being replanted, the holes kind of change. We saw that on like hole 18 this year. Hole 18 was one of the more difficult finishing holes all season last year. Obviously, the weather conditions were a little bit different last year, but hole 18 was a very challenging and scary hole. And, you would step up being with the idea that double bogey was in play. They cleared out all the woods on the left-hand side for hole 12, as well as for spectators to be in there. So it made it for a more enjoyable viewing experience for spectators. However, by doing so, it now took the double bogey out of play, and people that would have shots that typically would just be pitching out to the center of the fairway and then having another really challenging shot to even try to get out of the gap. Those players now are throwing forehands through gaps, throwing rollers, and getting birdie options from where a par would be almost nearly impossible last year. So there's changes like that definitely made the course a lot easier. But like you said, like the field's getting better and better. And unfortunately, it does feel like this is a kind of a course that is on its way out.
Okay, Hunter, what do you think? Is Idlewild on its way out? Do you agree?
I don't know. I think that the course in its current state would be on its way out, yes, but I do think there are certain things that can at least keep it on tour for a little while longer because it has such a strong community. It is a really solid disc golf course. It just is playing a bit easy. Now, it's not playing easy because the course is easy. It's playing easy because the field is disgusting. I'm not going to compare scores to last year because if you go to last year, the weather was kind of gross, muddy, all of that. So I'm going to compare scores to 2 years ago. I think it'll be a pretty fair comparison because changes to the course design have made the course slightly harder. But as Brodie just said, there's a few things that make the course slightly easier. So I think it'll play pretty similar. So 2 years ago, you had Kyle Klein win at 25 under. He took it down with that. This year, you have Gannon Burr win at 32 under. The real true, because I mean, that's just the top. One guy can get hot, whatever. The true tell to me was the cash line this year was at 16 under par. The cash line 2 years ago was at 9 under par. 9 under par this year puts you in 70th place. You're, what is that, 7 strokes out of cash? The field by itself has just gotten so much better that courses like this, where, yeah, they have teeth, yeah, they are difficult disc golf courses. They're just not to the current tour field anymore. There's too many really good players that can go out and just pick courses like this apart. So I think it has a chance at staying on tour, but it's going to take some serious changes.
Okay, Steven, do you agree?
Kind of. So what I look at is Burr shot 32 down, right? Winners from Preserve, Jonesboro, Waco, DDO all shot 30 down or better. So if Idlewild's too soft, you're saying the rest of those are too soft, right? Ultimately, I don't think Idlewild's too soft, but I think there's too many events on tour where the winners are averaging 8 to 10 down per round. And I think that makes us as a disc golf community think that scores are getting too soft. I know we don't try to compare to golf very often, but sometimes we do. And when we do, we look at that and it's just not comparable. Look at golf winners in a lot of situations, the scores are not that low. I think you could add a bit of OB to make it harder, but I think the Pro Tour as a whole needs to take a closer look at their course designs to really understand, what direction to take things moving forward. I know we're going to potentially talk about that later, but ultimately, I think that they need to decide what their vision of a good tour course is. And the pros, I think, should have a say in that ultimately. In the end, I think that they dictate what level is a good tour level course. But as of right now, no, Idlewild's not necessarily too soft, but there's too many courses on tour that are that soft.
Brodie, do you have another point?
Additional point. I think the main issue that Idlewild is going to have over the years is where the courses that Steven just mentioned, all those courses don't have a lot of OB. And so those courses all of a sudden can get a lot more challenging by making the fairways tighter.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that at Idlewild because of the flukiness of it, of where a lot of these holes, there are trees all over the fairway and you're kind of just throwing it in there and then you get up to your lie and then you scramble from there. If you start putting OB and stuff around a lot of these holes, you're going to start seeing holes play like 17 does there, which is a very fluky hole in the sense of where players are just chucking this at the basket and they're just crossing their fingers and hoping it stays in bounds, which is not good disc golf. So you're going to lose that and make the course even flukier if you start adding OB for it to be challenging.
And that's why I think the pros do need a say in this ultimately. The course designers for the pro level courses obviously need to think about things a little bit more, but the pros need to have a say.
Yeah,
Well, I think
go ahead, Hunter.
I was going to say the other thing that I think is important to this conversation is not necessarily the score relative to par, but the scoring fluctuation potential. And I think one thing that Idlewild really struggles with is I don't care if someone's shooting 32 under par to win a tournament if the potential to shoot even par is out there as well. This course is averaging like 4.5 under par for the entire field. But I think the real difficulty here is a lot of these softer par 4s and 5s, they just don't really have blow up potential.
Yeah.
And some of them are even called par 5s when they're actually tour level par 4s. And what it allows is just guys to just play for easy 4 over and over and over, and then you have a par 5 that's averaging like 4.1 for the weekend. And I think that's where it really comes in, is like there's not that much blow up potential on holes, so you don't have really big swings, and it just kind of eliminates the drama. So I don't think the score relative to par doesn't matter that much if the separation's there, and I think that's where Idlewild struggles.
Yeah,
I think
you have to play really, really bad now on that course to actually not shoot 4 or 5 under par.
Yeah, I think it's tough. It's tough to land, like you were saying, Brodie. It's tough to land your drive in a spot that you don't have a shot of making par. There's just so many, because you have the shorter par fours. Even if you're in a little bit of trouble, you just make forward progress on your next shot, and now you just got to get up and down. So that aspect is definitely there. It'll be interesting to see. We're going to kind of hop back into that subject in just a bit, but we're going to move on to the playoffs a little bit. So we're approaching the first playoff event of the season. This year, I believe we looked at it and we saw the cuts, Hunter. I think you remember they were like 96 make it to this event, and then it was 70 to the next,
72,
or
I think.
72 make it to the next. Before,
Really? There's only, I thought it was 80. I was just told by someone that 80 are in this event.
I think we read 72 yesterday.
Deglo, I think, was 96.
96 for Deglo.
Now,
And
this
then
was posted at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, well,
so maybe they've changed it.
It's definitely probably changed.
In any case, either way, obviously eventually the cut to the Tour Championship is pretty severe, cutting it all the way down to 32. But the playoffs at this moment don't really have a ton of ring to them. It signifies the end of the season has approached. Some big events are approaching. But at this point, even if you look at that cut down to 72, we don't really know a lot of those players. It doesn't feel super high stakes until you finally get to that final cut all the way to the Tour Championship. So my question is, as we get into the playoffs now, should those cuts be harsher after each event in order to increase the drama, or does it kind of make sense how it is now, maybe for the future proofing of that system? Hunter, what do you think?
I definitely think the cuts should be harsher, but I think the bigger problem is the playoffs are interrupted by 2 majors. So it's hard to get into playoff mode when, okay, we have a playoff event, and then we're going to go like one silver event, and then we go to Worlds, I think, and then we're going back into a playoff event, and then we go to USDGC, and then we go back to the Tour Championship. It's hard to get into any type of like excited playoff mode, because even if the cuts were harsher, let's say the cut started at 70 and then went to 40 or 50 and then went to 32, those weeks in between, you're still seeing all the players at majors. And so it's hard to like mentally build that storyline and remember, because, okay, sick, the cut happens at Deglo. But now if you do realize Zach Melton or someone got cut, you're like, oh, dude, I can't believe it. He's back at Worlds. And you're like, oh, I get to see him again. And then he's back gone again. And then it makes it like that in and out has got to be solved. And I think it's a very weird one, because in my opinion, playoffs definitely shouldn't start till after Worlds. But then the tough one to solve is USDGC almost needs to belong where it does, but it interrupts the playoffs. So I think they got something to figure out there. But for the sake of storylines, the cuts should definitely be harsher, because you're right. It doesn't feel dramatic until you get to the Tour Championship, because you're trimming the fat of the field, and it's like, I couldn't tell you who's missing right now. When you get to the Tour Championship, it gets real interesting.
Yeah, it's actually a very good point. A big push behind the playoffs in major sports a lot of times is like the idea that because that person or team I'm rooting for lost, I won't see them again until next season. The Cowboys just lost in the playoffs. I don't get to watch them play until next August. So, there's that effect for sure. Steven, what do you think about the playoffs? Do they need to make those cuts harsher?
100%. Hunter, I think, hit the nail on the head. But I think that, right now, playoffs kind of don't mean anything in disc golf. I know they have cuts, but for the most part, it's kind of just, if you're in the top 32, you're making it to the Pro Tour Championship, and that's what you're gunning for, right? I think that the cuts definitely need to be harsher. You should only be really allowed to play an MVP if you have a realistic opportunity with a win to get into the Tour Championship. Right now, that line is about 55 in the standings. I think you push it to 50, it creates more storylines. Maple Hill is the most prestigious course potentially in the world, most definitely probably on tour. And so the pros all want to play there. I think that it creates more potential nervousness down the stretch when trying to push for that top 50 or whatever to get to Maple Hill. So I think condensing it obviously will create more storylines. It makes everything a bit more electric. If that line was at 50 right now, you're looking at Barsby, Rathbun, Coling, Humphreys, Gibson, all being on the outside looking in. That's huge. That's electric. Right now, it's not that way, especially if it's going to be top 72. It looks like they did push D-Glow down to only 80, based on the PDGA website right now. So maybe they're considering that. I don't know what Maple Hill's going to be. If it's still 72 and you're only going from 80 to 72, that's even less exciting. So who knows?
Yeah,
But we will see. I think they need to make some changes for sure.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know if they're pushing it down more. Like I said, we only had the article from the beginning of the year. Brodie, what do you think about the cuts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the cuts matter that much because I think the people that are being cut, it's not the craziest storyline. If you're outside the top 50 and you're not able to play at MVP, I don't think you had a great season, and so no one's really caring whether or not you're playing at MVP or not, anyways. Other than super notable names that might have fallen off and had a bad season or got injured or what it may be. The big storyline that no one's talking about is the number one rated player in the world is actually playing at D-Glow somehow. Not really quite sure how that happened. So you have the number one rated player in the world playing D-Glow, hasn't played a Disc Golf Pro Tour event all season, but is in the playoffs. And then you have the number one FPO player that has dominated all season not playing in the playoffs. So that's an interesting contrast between the two fields. But yeah, no, I don't think it really matters right now. I think as the tour continues to grow, I think then storylines can kind of come from that. But as of right now, we're not really talking about who isn't in the D-Glow field, right? No one's really saying, oh man, this guy's 82nd. He didn't make it into the D-Glow field. And I think that's kind of a little bit on the same page of people not making MVP and then people not making the tour championship as the field continues to grow and more names drop. As we're seeing right now, Calvin's the only player right now that has somewhat of a decent cash streak, which is at, I think, 32 events. Joel Freeman just dropped his 32 events. That's it. I mean, we were talking about Kale LaVisca not that long ago, like 260 or something. So we're seeing it getting harder and harder, obviously, to finish at the top. So I think eventually we'll start seeing bigger names, I think, missing out of the tour championship. But also the schedule is just wacky. We've got like 5 tournaments left and 2 of them are majors and 1 is the tour championship. That's a very, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, the schedule is certainly very backloaded at the moment. Hunter, what do you think?
I was just going to say a side note. If you're trying to build hype around the playoffs, maybe make it easy to find out who's going and not going and like how many players actually make it. I've been searching this whole time. Both of them were talking. I can't find any updates on what the cuts are, where they are. If there was an announcement, it just gets buried and the Pro Tour site is impossible to find information on. And I hate it. And then on top of it, yeah, why the frick's Manabu Kajiyama playing D-Glow? Like, yeah, sure, this guy's the highest rated player in the world, but he hasn't been anywhere all season. How do you get to the playoff? The Pro Tour's got to figure out something with communication because like that doesn't make any freaking sense. And it should be easy to know who's going where, and that should be like a main storyline on DGN of like, this is the cut, and it should be a hard cut. These are playoffs. It's not like someone's going to walk in and make it to the Super Bowl.
You didn't even get the Disc Golf Pro Tour exemption either. There's apparently 2 exemptions that the Pro Tour can just give to people. You didn't even get one of those, too.
Give me one of those. Give me in these playoffs.
Yeah. Manabu, 1056. So that just speaks volumes.
Here's the funny thing, too, Hunter. I don't think even if you got into the playoff that you could actually even win, which is like,
well, if you win one, you ought to get to the tour championship, right? Is that still a rule?
Oh, yeah. Okay. If you're a Pro Tour winner, I think you get it. They reserve slots or whatever.
But
I would try to look it up, but it would take me the rest of the show to find the article.
But if they threw you into if they threw you into the playoff and you got second place, I don't think that's enough points to make it into the next event.
No,
which would be hilarious. Like if Manabu got second, everyone's like, "Oh my god, I can't wait to see this guy play again." Nope.
See ya.
He did not qualify for the next event. Sorry.
Are the silver events still open to everyone in between as well?
What does that mean?
Yeah, like could you sneak into the next playoff event because of a silver event after the first playoff?
Yeah, like what
event?
if you're at the
That's
cut
crazy.
for MVP and then you go to a silver event and you sneak in?
Crazy.
That's gross.
I think so. I might have to do that.
Here's the thing about silver, elite plus, playoff. None of it means anything.
Very confusing.
None of it means anything. They're trying to throw all these labels out and they can't keep track of them. They don't know they don't know what's going on.
It does look like Maple Hill got cut to 50.
Okay.
Wow. Okay. Well, I wish we would have like been told, but
But there's probably
Yeah.
a tweet that was sent out that you
I'm
just had to
telling
stumble
people
on
right
to
now.
find.
No.
All right. It's like word of mouth, it feels like. It's like if you don't get told by somebody, you have no idea. Okay. Well, we're going to hop a little bit back into kind of what we were talking about earlier with the some of the maybe more dated courses on tour. So, my question here is, disc golf and especially the pro tour as a whole is still very young. Most of in 10 years from now, most of the fans that we have will probably be newer fans. That's just kind of how it'll work as the sport grows, hopefully. So my question is, does the tour need to rip the Band-Aid off while they're still young and start removing some of the beloved courses / events in exchange for better courses / locations? And then the bigger question here is, which events should be the first to go? Let's start with Steven here.
Yeah, I think that first of all, yes, the tour is young enough to do this. I think that do they need to? I'm not 100% sure. I think they should personally. I think that first of all, you get rid of one of the Texas events for God's sakes. I don't like watching Texas disc golf. I know it's a huge state, but you only need one elite series there. You can move on, find something in the southeast. Look for Florida. There's the throw down the mountain. Once they figure out their lawsuit situation, we can hopefully have an event there. Also, of course, I think a lot of the pros really liked North Cove. The only problem with North Cove is obviously spectators. It's so far out there that it's difficult to have a giant spectator base. And so I don't know how well it would play for the Pro Tour. I would also love to see the growth of European disc golf. I would love to see 2 elites in a major out there. I think that there are some incredible courses there that the Pro Tour can utilize that are already in place. But ultimately, I think that yes, they are young enough. They should rip the Band-Aid off. After removing one of the Texas events, I'm not quite sure exactly which other ones. I mean, we talked about all of those courses that have really, really low scores for the winner as a, opposed to par. So, I mean, you could look at those. People are going to throw a lot of hate if you throw out, the Preserve or Idlewild as a potential spot to remove from the tour. But I mean, we'll see. I think that again, European disc golf, remove one of the Texas courses, and maybe North Cove and Florida are the couple that we could throw in there to make the tour just that much better.
Yeah, definitely. Brodie, what do you think they should do?
Well, here's the problem. We don't have solutions, right? Like if there were better courses, if there was better disc golf communities that could like handle the amount of volunteers needed, if all those things existed, I feel like they would be going to those courses. We see them trying it at new silver events. So they are trying to find new spots that are good. So it's tough to just be like, oh yeah, this course is shouldn't be on tour, because then it's like, okay, well, what should be? So I don't really know what the options are, but I will contradict myself and tell you the courses that I don't think should be on tour. So I think Waco, get rid of Waco and find a tournament. I'm not going to say don't have another tournament in Texas, because Texas is massive. Find a tournament in Dallas. Find a course in somewhere in Dallas. That would make a lot more sense than in Waco. But then you have Dallas, and then you go down to Austin, or vice versa, Austin then to Dallas. The next one that really jumps out at me would probably be Dynamic Discs, Emporia, Kansas. Unless they decide to continue to have like a massive tournament for amateurs the same week, that tournament doesn't make any sense. It was a ghost town. It was very sad. It was very depressing. Get us out of there. I'm not going to talk about silver events at all, because who knows? I'm just going down. Des Moines is great. Preserve is great. PCS. I'm not going to do Europe either. Yeah, everything else I'm fine with. Idlewild, I can see. I mean, being close to Cincinnati, it would be great to find maybe a bigger course near Cincinnati, or if they are able to somehow manage that. The biggest concern I have with Idlewild really is, ever since I got on tour, which was not that long ago, there has been complaints about the tee pads being bad. They are the worst tee pads we play all year. If there's any sort of moisture, any sort of mud, any sort of rain, the tee pads are almost unplayable. They haven't changed. So I don't know if like the thought of like, oh, well, they can just put a new tee pad on this hole and make the hole a lot longer and more difficult. I don't know if that's actually possible, because it hasn't shown that they've been able to do that. So that would be my only concern with Idlewild. But I know that crowd in that area is great. So somewhere in the Cincinnati area would be great.
All right, Hunter, what courses are you scrapping?
Yeah, well, I think it's not necessarily, in my opinion, this question isn't at all about the courses because I think you can fix a lot of things with courses. Because I mean, there's so many great disc golf courses that could host pro tour events that I don't think that's going to be a problem necessarily. I think it's about the community and being near big cities. Waco, in my opinion, it's like an hour and a half from Dallas. I've made the drive. I think that Waco's a better course than a lot of courses in Dallas, so I think Waco's fine to stay personally. Um, I think that like if you're a fan in Dallas, you're making that drive to watch a pro tour event, and you're probably with it only being an hour and a half. I'm probably, if I'm not going to Waco, I'm not going to one that's 30 minutes on the other side of Dallas. Is my thought process on it. But I think you got to look at places where the community isn't big enough to support an event on their own. DDO is the glaringly obvious one. Emporia, Kansas is smaller than Lynchburg, Virginia, and Lynchburg's tiny. DDO, I don't think makes sense unless it's massive GBO like they used to, glass blown open. But you remove the AM side, and we saw that event dies. Ledgestone's one that it would be similar if they ever removed the AM side of Ledgestone, which I don't think they ever would. But if they did, I don't think it could sustain itself. And that is a question too of the longevity of the tour. Do we want events to be only sustainable if they have a like 500 plus player AM side that goes on the exact same weekend? I don't know the answer to that. I would say no personally, but maybe we do. It is an easy way to get spectators, but I think DDO is the only glaringly obvious one. And I would just be focusing more so on getting to bigger communities and then figuring out the course after, because we need spectators, we need volunteers, we need all of that. And that comes from having more people, more population dense areas. And that's going to allow ticket sales, activations, all of that to go up. And when you're going to a ghost town like DDO, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting. Brodie, what do you have to say?
I'd like to say that Hunter's take on 30 minutes and an hour and a half being the same is definitely a take from someone that lives in a small city that never has to drive in traffic. 30 minutes and an hour and a half are not the same. If you had a course
to watch disc golf.
No, I mean driving across Dallas to watch disc golf versus
his point was if you're a big
Waco,
disc golf fan, like if I were in Dallas as a disc golf fan, the hour and a half
that take's gonna get wrecked.
That's fine.
That's a terrible.
I would drive to Charlotte to watch pro sports.
Yeah, like I'm just saying as a disc golf fan, like if I would drive that half an hour very like in a heartbeat. So like it wouldn't really, if I wasn't willing to make that drive at my level of disc golf fandom.
I'm saying there's a bunch of casual fans in Dallas that would love to just go watch if it was in Dallas.
No, are they going to Dallas? That's the question. Are they actually showing up? There's only one way to find out is to put an event there.
No, I know. I'm saying. I mean, I know firsthand like a dozen people that never go down to Waco to watch the tournament. But if it was in Dallas and it was a 30-minute drive, they would go.
It's an interesting topic. The idea of where they should locate events, because there's always that question of like, okay, if we focus in on just big cities, like if we try to get as close to Charlotte as possible, as close to Dallas, can we draw in people? And if we lower ticket prices, that's another big one. Can we just draw in people passively? Like, oh, there's this disc golf thing going on. Let's go check it out. And then there's also that idea of like, are there a lot of disc golf communities that are just a little bit like you don't really know about them unless you're in them? Because I can tell you for free, if a pro tour came to Lynchburg, the turnout would be very, very good. Even though we're a small city, we have a really good disc golf community. When Worlds comes here, and we also draw from that area of Charlotte as well. When Worlds comes here next year, it's going to be very big. But I think it's difficult to find some of those hotbeds sometimes. So I think it's better for the pro tour to probably double down on the cities and work that way. But I think.
My only point to that is like if you had a good course, obviously, just outside 30 minutes outside of Atlanta, are more people going to that Worlds or the one in Lynchburg? Like that's an interesting, because we haven't really had. When was the last time Worlds was at a place that actually was near a big city?
I mean, just look at USDGC every year. It's the best.
I think Utah or
Well,
Utah
I was trying to get out of Charlotte because Charlotte's a massive disc golf city. So I was trying to pick like a big city
when World was in Appling, Georgia at IDGC. That's like what, an hour and a half outside of Atlanta, somewhere in there, and it was pretty well attended. The problem with that was the courses were like 50 minutes apart to get to the fort from WR Jackson, but
I always think it's interesting to look at the spectators each week. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Brodie, but when I was looking at coverage of Idlewild, I may have seen 500-600 people following the lead card on the final day. Like, would that be a kind of a correct number, do you think, as far as like what kind of people were there?
Yeah, it's tough for me to gauge on this one because unfortunately I did fall off the leaderboard quite fast. But I can normally get a decent feel just by like how many people I have to like do autographs and stuff with. So certain tournaments, it's like literally 3 or 4, and there's just not that many people on the grounds. But at Idlewild, there was a decent amount of people every single day.
Yeah.
I think the reason why it might look not like there wasn't that many people was because obviously there's a lot of holes at Idlewild where only VIPs can actually go to.
True.
And so that might take into the account. So I don't know what like hole 18 looks like at the end.
Yeah.
But I thought at least for me, I mean, from what I saw, like on round 2, I think like there was a good card of Chris Dickerson, Nate Sexton, a couple other big guys, and they had 50 or 60 people go out.
Yeah.
And they were like 2 hours in front of the lead card. So
Yeah.
I think Idlewild's always normally pretty well attended, but
Yeah.
we never know when the Pro Tour doesn't really announce like attendance.
Yeah, it's just a curious one because, like I said, I was just like, if the Pro Tour were to come to our area, I don't know. I have this feeling it'd be super well attended, and maybe I'm wrong. Like I'm interested to see like as it progresses, and I don't know. All right, we're gonna move on to our next topic here. So Gannon obviously got the win at Idlewild. Kind of looked like the dominant Gannon that we know we can have sometimes when his game is clicking. So for a lot of this season, Calvin was kind of the guy. He was the number 1 player in the world pretty unanimously. It's been a while now since his last Elite Series win. And with Gannon's recent win, he now has more Elite Series wins on the season, though his average finishes have not been nearly as stellar. So the question here, I guess, is Gannon now having a better season than Calvin? And is he the front runner for Player of the Year? And if your answer is a most obviously yes, what is Calvin going to need to gain that back? We'll start here with Brodie.
This is where it's a great debate because it depends on what you look at. In certain sports, no one really cares how well you finished. It's did you win at the end? You can't be a dynasty in basketball if you won the NBA Finals once, but you got second 3 years before that and 3 years after that. You're not a dynasty. So in certain sports, it's literally winning or not. I think in disc golf, it probably is going to be kind of similar to like tennis and golf, the other individual popular sports, of where people just are going to look at how many wins you have. 5-10 years from now, you're just going to look at how many wins Gannon had in 2023 and how many wins Calvin had in 2023. Now, in that regard, then you're going to look at Gannon and say, yes, Gannon had a better season. However, if you're looking at simply trying to break it down and look more on the skill wise and who is playing better, you can't argue against Calvin. What Calvin has done this season he has played better disc golf as a whole, and it's been more impressive of what he has done as a whole. However, Gannon has more accolades. So there's two sides to the coin. It just depends on what you're going to look at. And I think in the future, and time goes, no one's really going to look back and see how close Calvin was to winning so many events. You're just going to look at the numbers of how many majors you had and how many elite events you had, or, if you want to throw silver in there too. But
if you had to hand out Player of the Year right now, who are you handing it to if you had to hand it out?
Me personally, again, like, are we talking about like actually like the Player of the Year?
The Player of the Year, like that people vote on. If you had to hand it out, if they said, if you had to hand it out right now,
I would say the person that has played the best this season has been Calvin, and it's not really close.
So you would give Calvin Player of the Year.
If the Player of the Year is solely based on who has had the best season, like who has played the best this season, it's been Calvin.
Okay, fair enough. Hunter, what do you think?
So I think you asked a twofold question that have two completely different answers. I think Calvin Heimberg has had the better season by far. Brodie just brought up, you can't really argue that. The guy's average finish place is ridiculous. He has more podiums than anyone. He's choked away. He's lost more tournaments than anyone else. And he's disgusting. He's great. But I think
Terrible.
currently Gannon Buhr is the front runner for player of the year because I think at the end of the day, wins matter, wins talk. And we're also, let's keep in mind here, we're talking about one Elite Series win different. So we still have plenty of events that can easily change, and Calvin could win one. And if they're tied on wins, because silver wins, yeah, Gannon has one more, but I think Calvin's consistency is more important than a silver win, in my opinion. And so I think if they tie on Elite Series wins, then it just goes to the better season, which is Calvin. So I think Gannon's the front runner for player of the year currently, simply because wins talk. But we have so many events coming up that Calvin could easily win to flip it. And especially if the guy can figure out how to pick up a major, then yeah, game over. He's player of the year. But right now, I think Calvin's having the better season, but Gannon's player of the year.
Certainly a lot of room for it. Steven, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with Hunter on this. It's not black and white for sure. Gannon has put together a resume with his wins that obviously spark a discussion and an argument that can be had for him. However, Calvin is player of the year. His average finish, you can't overlook that in for one extra elite win. I mean, surely you could. Yeah, watch Hunter try. But Calvin's been unstoppable. The only reason that Calvin's season is not a Kristen season right now is because the MPO has so many more players that have the capability to pop off for that one weekend and get hot. He has been the epitome of consistency. He's only missed the podium 5 times this entire season, and only one of those was outside the top 10. Granted, it was the major, so that's one strike against him, I would say. But I don't think it's necessarily that close right now. We're looking at this season, the body of work this season. He has been that person all season long. He's the one that's constantly in the top 3. I just don't see a way that you could argue against it at this point in time. If Calvin doesn't win anything else and Buhr either podiums out or gets another win, then I think it's a wrap. But Gannon's got to show a little bit more consistency in my mind, or get another win to take over player of the year.
Yeah, certainly very neck and neck. And I definitely, if Calvin's finishing place is absurd, and if he can get another win or two, it's going to be a historical season. Brodie, what do you have to say before I kick you off?
I was just last thing was player of the year. If you really want to do it year after year and have it like consistent, you just have to come up with a good formula for it of like strength of schedule or strength of field and how many points you get for those wins, because it's just going to be very, very difficult. Because at what line, let's say Gannon wins 3 events and doesn't cash at all the other events, and Calvin gets second place at every event, who had a better season? And there will be people on both sides of the fence, of some saying Gannon, some saying Calvin. So I think that's where you just kind of have to have a formula to just be able to figure it out.
It's like the NBA MVP, where it's like nobody really knows what it means. They just kind of seem to hand it out because like people are like, well, Jokic should have won again this year because like why didn't he? But then it was like, did they give it to Embiid?
But that's less arbitrary though. Like or that is more arbitrary because you're not playing the same people and all this stuff. Yeah, like disc golf is pretty black and white.
And disc golf has more opportunity for such a formula, most certainly. Hunter, what do you have to say?
I was just gonna say I think it's great to not. I mean, I think it'd be good to have a formula, but I think it's also sick not to, because it finally creates a storyline in disc golf that people can talk about. But side note, the other thing I was going to say is it's a shame that how good of a season Calvin is having is going to be forgotten because he doesn't win.
It is valid. 10 years from now, I don't think people will be talking about the average finishing place. All right, we're going to move on to our rapid fire round now. Brodie is gonzo. His reign of terror has ended.
He needs to get back standing.
Yeah, maybe if he stood up, things would be different. Just not as much passion. All right, Hunter and Steven all knotted up. We got 3 topics here since you're tied up. Does anybody want to defer? I feel like I have to offer that now because Brodie would always take it.
I'll defer.
Wow, I was pure pressure, I guess. Steven's going to defer. So Hunter, you're going to go first here. All right. Starting off with our first topic here. So Prodigy had 3 of the 4 players on the lead card at Idlewild. They have 6 players in the top 30, including many young rising stars. I feel like people just keep coming back to it. I know the commentary was touching on it too, just be like, wow, like the Prodigy scouting department, holy cow. They've seemingly made some of the most valued signings, just guys coming out of nowhere. So my question here, does any company have a more valuable young core at the moment? Hunter, what do you think?
Well, I want to answer this in two different ways because I think it's tough to look past Discmania just because Eagle McMahon is still very young. You also have Kyle Klein very young, but I really think that the company here that is the right answer is Discraft. Mainly, they already have a solid young core, right? They have Micah Groth, Evan Scott. They have, I mean, other players too, but the two other key ones, Adam Hammes, AB, they're all very young. People forget how young they are, but I think the real key here is I'm not a big baseball guy, but I hear Trevor talk about the Orioles all the time. I think Prodigy's the Orioles. They're a small market team, right? And they're developing this young core that's going to be eaten up by the Yankees, which is Discraft. So I think you got to look at companies with big money, right? And I think Discraft's positioned to, yeah, great little young core, develop them, great talent scouting. We'll take them. And they also have a solid young core right now. So I think Discraft's the company that's the right answer here.
Dang, just pulling out my heartstrings right there.
Sorry, I
Steven,
had to. It made
what do you
sense.
think, Steven?
Okay. He should get less points because he tried to pull those out on you there, and I don't know you that well. So, regardless of that, does any company have a better actual young core right now this season? No. In my opinion, this season, Prodigy has the most valuable young core. Now, will they be able to keep that young core? Do they have enough capital or do they sell enough discs to do so? I don't think so. I think if Burr goes to Discmania, then easily that becomes the tops, right? But as of right now, this season, I mean, you have Burr, you have Isaac Robinson, Ezra Robinson. I just think even with those three and how well they're consistently playing on the Pro Tour, I think that you can make that argument that they have the best young core. Yes, Discraft has some of those rising stars. AB hasn't gotten a win this season. Adam Hammes hasn't gotten a win this season. So ultimately, I think that Prodigy right now does have the best, but I don't think they will continue to do so.
Hammes does have a win this season.
Ooh.
That's a tough one there. You're gonna have to analyze that.
It's early, you guys. I'm sorry. If I lose,
was it Portland?
Yeah.
Portland?
Yeah, Elite Plus.
Portland.
It
Yeah.
matters more than all the rest, man.
You're right.
And, hey, I don't blame you as much, Steven, because he hasn't done anything else this season. But
I wouldn't have remembered it.
It will be interesting because, like you were saying, Hunter, Prodigy, it's a big question of can they keep their guys? I mean, they got rid of Babcock, but if they still had him, there's another one. And like Ezra Robinson kind of emerging this season, it's honestly been crazy how much their young players are thriving right now. And I feel like a lot of them came under the radar other than Gannon. A lot of those guys we didn't necessarily expect to rise like they have. Man. It's definitely going to be interesting to watch. All right, we're going to move on to our next topic here. So the Pro Tour has historically sold presenting sponsorship slots and other similar naming rights, with the most recent example being the playoffs presented by Barbasol, who also have the Tour Championship. And it's funny because we were just talking about this at the beginning of the show with all the different naming rights and the way that they throw them around. So my question is, should the Pro Tour look to sell the naming rights to the entire tour? Example would be the Barclays Premier League. That we've seen other sporting leagues sell the names of the entire tour. Or would that the counterpoint would that look unprofessional and or cheap? What if we had the LL Bean Disc Golf Tour? So I guess the real question here is the money more important now that we should just be selling the naming rights as much as we can? Who really cares? Or is there a line that we need to draw in the sand somewhat soon to keep the professional look of the sport intact? Steven, what do you think?
As we saw with Idlewild, they don't necessarily care to keep the professional look of the tour intact. However, I think that for the entire tour, it is doable, but it's got to be with the right sponsor. I don't think that you can throw out an LL Bean and have any sort of notoriety with that. I mean, yeah, they're a decently large company, but they're not known to the public. I think that if you come out and you say the Disc Golf Pro Tour presented by Barbasol or by Johnsonville, that is a name that resonates with the general public and can draw potential more eyeballs into the sport. I think, Disc Golf Pro Tour presented by Barbasol sounds a lot cleaner than Disc Golf Pro Tour presented by TrueBank, because not knows what TrueBank is, right? Unless you live in Des Moines, right? So I think that it really comes down to who is that right sponsor. If it can be somebody outside the, outdoorsy world, unless it's like, what if it was Dick's, right? If Dick's presented the Pro Tour, I think that a lot of people would pay attention to that, not only for the comedy aspect of it, but just purely because of the name brand recognition.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it would definitely get people's attention. Hunter, what do you think?
Well, I think when it comes to the entire tour, I think the Pro Tour has something going for it, which is the name of the Pro Tour is the Disc Golf Pro Tour. So no matter how you slap a name on it, it kind of just seems like the presented by sponsor. Like even the LL Bean Disc Golf Pro Tour, it's kind of like we're just cutting out the words presented by, like Disc Golf Pro Tour presented by LL Bean. So I don't think it would be necessarily unprofessional. I think what they want to avoid is flagship big time events being locked to a sponsor. So not necessarily Elite Series. I'm talking like FedEx Cup, right? Like the PGA Tour, the FedEx Cup. What happens if FedEx says deuces? Now you have a lot of like name recognition. We saw this happen with the D League, G League, NBA. We saw that happen with the Web.com Tour, Corn Ferry Tour, where you have a lot of name recognition that rides with it. And then it would take like a whole retraining of your audience. And I think that's more what we want to avoid. But the Disc Golf Pro Tour, like by itself, the name Disc Golf Pro Tour is going to stick around. And so I don't think it necessarily blurs a line or confuses. And to counter Steven's point somewhat, I think LL Bean I would consider as big as Barbasol. Maybe it's an East Coast thing. B, like Barclays Premier League. I knew Barclays Premier League. And so the only way I knew what Barclays was the Premier League. So I think that's even like a bigger thing of like, if you're a fan of the sport, I don't give two rips what Barclays is. I learned about it through the sport. Same thing with TrueBank. If it was the TrueBank Disc Golf Pro Tour, I would learn what TrueBank is because I'm a disc golf fan.
It's an interesting one. Yeah, I think Barclays Premier League is one of the most like successful examples because it got so, they had such a long-standing partnership that people were calling it the BPL. Like that was what we called it. And I didn't even know when I first got into soccer, I didn't even know there was a sponsor because it
But
was
imagine if instead of it, because it just says Premier League, it has nothing to do with the sport. If it was like European Football League, like Barclays European Football League. That's a much easier one, I feel like, to remove.
It rolls off the tongue way easier than like you're right with the whole Disc Golf Pro Tour. Like if it was just the Pro Tour, it'd be easier to just attach a name to it. But the fact that it's already saying Disc Golf Pro Tour, it's a lot to digest for sure. I honestly, it's just interesting. I wonder how much they could sell that for, and I wonder if they've considered it really.
Yeah, I think that what you guys were just talking about, making it, there is a difference between the LL Bean Disc Golf Pro Tour and the Disc Golf Pro Tour presented by LL Bean, because when you're being presented by, that is a presenting sponsor that you can change out repeatedly and not have that potential issue of like, oh, now we're attached to this, and if we remove it, it makes it weird. So
well, there was a year that the Waste Management Open was just the Phoenix Open because they had lost that sponsor for a year, and it was like everybody was like, wait, what's the Phoenix Open? Like,
well, it's like the MVP Open or the Maple Hill Open or Vibram Open or the Maple Hill Open presented by Vibram.
True.
Like it was the Vibram Open for so long, and now if I say the Vibram Open, people are like,
if
weird shoe company was into disc golf.
If MVP dropped that, it would be a weird like adjustment period. And I think eventually, if the event itself is good enough, it can recoup. But it's a weird period of adjustment. All right, we're gonna head into our last topic here. I think this is perfect because we have an East Coaster and a West Coaster on the final round here. But here's the question, just straight up: which is better disc golf for the tour, the West Coast stops or the East Coast swing? Hunter, what do you think?
Well, I'm looking at a map of the tour right now, and it's kind of a difficult one to answer because if we want to go, it's not really. If we want to go just the coast, like the specific coast, then we're looking at Portland and OTB versus MVP, GMC, USDGC, Tour Championship.
I think the best way to phrase this is the westward moving tour or the eastward moving tour.
I'm glad you said it that way because let's draw a line in the middle of the country here. Okay, the West Coast gains LVC, the East Coast gains Open at Austin, Waco, DDO, DMC, TPC, LDG, JBO, MCO, IDL, D-Glow. We get the whole tour. That's my point. Is really once you get west of Texas, you have LVC, OTB, and Portland. And those are probably the three most hated events when it comes to the tour and coverage wise. And then if you go east of Texas, you get all the beloved golf. So I don't really think this is a debate.
Yeah.
Steven, do you have any defense?
No. I've already lost, so I'm gonna use my time here to say that Hunter is well, there's no argument. The East Coast or the East half of the United States is definitely better for disc golf. Now, I will say that the West Coast does have some amazing cities that the Disc Golf Pro Tour could expand to if they could find the right course and the right community. I mean, unfortunately, in Southern California, there is not a true pro level course. You guys came here, you saw. There is not a pro level course in Southern California, but if there was, it would be massive. If you could find a course here in Southern California, in Orange County, Los Angeles, or even San Diego, it would be one of the biggest turnouts on tour, period. We have a huge community here. We just don't have the courses to support it.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate, but I mean, there's no debate. The East Coast is far superior when it comes to the pro tour and what's better for disc golf in general.
It's a tough one when disc golf exists so much on park space, and when you get to a lot of those California parks, they're just not big enough. You know, we have on the East Coast, we just have these giant parks that are just have nothing in them and are just perfect for disc golf. Because like La Mirada, it's a great course, just not big enough. You know,
No.
it's just not anymore for the tour.
Even with the Golden State layout, the big tour one that they used to use and that they still use for big tournaments here, the A tiers that they run there, it's just not it's not the same. It's not. It does have that prestige. Oak Grove has the prestige. Morley has the prestige. It's just not big enough.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how the West Coast continues to kind of fit its way into the tour puzzle. All right, that's the end of our show today. Hunter coming in with a good connection gets the win.
Was holding me back.
It was really refreshing. It was really refreshing to have Hunter on good connection today. I feel like we really got to see his full potential.
Yeah, for my victory lap, I want to come after standing Brodie. I've beaten sitting Brodie twice. I feel like I can't get my flowers until I beat standing Brodie. I've never gone against standing Brodie except for maybe once when I was Robot Hunter. I'd like to go against standing Brodie, and just so I can validate my winning.
That's true. It's kind of like winning in a field without Kristen, right?
Exactly. And that's what I feel like. Yeah.
Yeah.
We need Dustin, Hunter, standing Brodie, and Steven.
I'm handcuffed here, guys.
Why is that?
Can't stand.
Well, it's very dependent on the time of day we do this, and also my location. This is a very bad location. Like I'm in like vaulted ceilings, and I've got two roommates right now that are sleeping because it's 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever.
It's
So
9:30.
Debate night finale after the pro tour ends.
I'm trying to be a good roommate, man.
I respect it. I want to take on people at their best. I want my wins to be when people are at their best.
The media doesn't want you to see Brodie Smith as a good roommate. That's not a narrative they want to see. So let's push that out there. Let's get that out into the world. All right. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Debate Night. We'll be back next week. We'll see you then.